Throughout history, the United States and England have been related. Originally, the two countries opposed each other when Americans felt oppressed by England's rule. Later, the two saw each other as allies against common enemies. In World War II, the two countries joined forces to take down Axis powers. World War II helped establish good relations between Great Britain and the United States that have lasted into the modern day. As early as 1936, the British knew they were going to need allies if there was to be a war in the future. They were originally looking at Germany and France. Germany was obviously out quickly because Great Britain declared war on Germany after the Nazis invaded Poland. Since the Nazis took control of France early on in the war, Great Britain needs to find an ally that could offer stronger military aid. An English newspaper written before the war even stated, "If France falls out, then England must try to work with Germany and the United States." Even though France wasn't able to send much military help in the war, Britain and its allies helped France throughout the war. Early on in the war, people realized that England and the United States were similar, partially due to the fact that England used to control the United States. People realized that because they were similar, they could potentially be allies. Even though the two countries separated in the 1700s, evident similarities, such as both countries having a democracy, showed that they could possibly work together in the future. Another country allied with Great Britain and the United States was Canada. Canada was still part of the British Commonwealth. Some people saw a possible merger between the three nations, with the United States also becoming part of the British Commonwealth. A 1940 newspaper article states, "Some Canadians foresee a merger of the British Commonwealth and United States, with Canada as the hub of an English-speaking union." These were, and still are, three most prominent English-speaking nations in the world, which is why some people could foresee a merger. It was concluded that if Great Britain and Canada didn't work with the United States during World War II, they would need to work together in the future at some point. In 1941, England started to get hit hard by the Nazis. U-boats, mines, and surface raiders created huge issues with shipping. Shipping was at less than 2/3 of the pre-war volume. Starvation of the British people was a possibility. Strategic bombing also targeted civilians, which shows the aspects of a total war. This was also known as the Blitz. Some sources show how terrifying it really was to live in Britain at the time of the war. One woman said, "My dad was away all the time making bombs. We had no mom. I remember being terrified and there was no dad there." Another man said, "I was 10 when it started. Left a big impression as to what war is and what it's really like and what can happen. It's an unfavorable impression." The children of people alive at the time also noticed how big of an effect the war had on their parents. One man said, "It dominated a generation of my parents. They had to go without food and had the constant fear of death over them." My great-grandmother, Anne Deans, was born in Glasgow, Scotland. She lived in London during World War II. She was often caught in the middle of the Blitz and had to find shelter. When she was in her late teens, she was walking down the street once and saw a man killed by a bomb in front of her. Meanwhile, her future husband, my great-grandfather, Robert Coffey, was fighting in the war. Before the war, he served in India back when it was a colony of Great Britain. During the war, he was a paratrooper in the British Royal Army. He fought the Nazis in North Africa during the war. On the other side of my family, my other great-grandfather, Robert Hales, also served in the Royal Army. His son, David Hales, is my oldest grandparent and was the only one alive during the war. He was born in 1940 in Plymouth, a city in southwestern England. Many English cities, including Plymouth, were very dangerous places at the time because of bombings. This caused many children to be evacuated to fishing and farming towns on the English countryside where bombings were not likely. Since my grandfather was a very young child at the time of the war, he was evacuated to one of these towns to live with a family that would take care of him until the end of the war. It was much safer here than in Plymouth, where there were bombings. In 1942, the United States and Great Britain decided to work with each other and to divide war responsibilities. The United States would end up becoming responsible for the Pacific Theater. There, they fought the Japanese, who ended up attacking the United States at Pearl Harbor. Great Britain would be responsible for the Middle East and the Indian Ocean areas. The European, Mediterranean, and Atlantic area would be a joint effort between Great Britain and the United States. Stewart says, in the spring of 1942, Britain and the United States agreed on a worldwide division of strategic responsibility. The U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff would have primary responsibility for war in the Pacific, and the British Chiefs for the Middle East Indian Ocean region, while the European, Mediterranean, Atlantic area would be a combined responsibility of both the staffs. The Arcadia Conference was a meeting between Roosevelt and Churchill along with their staffs. Here, they decided that there should be one leader in each of the theaters. For the most part, this idea was upheld. In 1941, Hitler turned on the Soviet Union, invading Russia in June under Operation Barbarossa. Since the Soviets now needed allies, the Big Three met for the first time in Tehran, Iran for the Tehran Conference. The Big Three were Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the President of the United States, and Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. The three would meet to discuss future plans. During the Tehran Conference, along with other conferences, pre-Cold War tensions were laid. The three didn't agree on certain things. It was called the Strange Alliance because it was a capitalist country, a communist country, and a colonial country. Great Britain and the United States allied with the Soviet Union for necessity. The three needed to join together in order to defeat the Nazis. Though there was debate, the final plan was a combination of the British peripheral strategy and American strategy of mass. In January 1944, General Dwight Eisenhower was appointed the commander of Operation Overlord. Throughout the process, the United States became more like the British in planning, not as much in strategy, but in diplomacy and methods of planning. One source states, as a byproduct of the debate and negotiation over grand strategy in mid-war, the planning techniques and methods of the Americans became more nearly like those of their British ally, even if their strategic ideas were still different. They became more skilled in the art of military diplomacy, of quid pro quo, or it might be termed as the tactics of strategic planning. Next, D-Day was planned. Great Britain, the United States, and Canada would participate. D-Day was a combination of the American concepts of mass and the British peripheral strategy. The American concept of mass was using a large number of troops in a certain area. The British peripheral strategy is one in which one would attack their enemy indirectly. They would attack somewhere other than the enemy's main center of commands. The American units Utah and Omaha would attack, along with the British units Gold and Sword and the Canadian unit Juno. On D-Day, these groups of British, American, Canadian troops crossed the English Channel to invade Normandy in northern France. The area is controlled by Nazis, and the main goal of the mission was to end up liberating France. Paratroopers and amphibious troops landed on Normandy. Within a week, they had secured the beaches. The Germans were very confused during the attack. The absence of General Rommel, who happened to be away on leave at the time, didn't help. The Allies would continue to move through France and finish securing it. By August, the Seine River was reached and Paris was liberated. D-Day was an impressive psychological attack on the Germans. The attack also ended up stopping Hitler from sending more troops into France to build up the Eastern Front against the Soviets. Throughout the following years, the Allies ended up crushing the Axis powers. Throughout the years during and after World War II, Americans and British have remained allies even up to this day.